The boy recalls the events of 10 years ago. Then sharp blades fell from the sky, so many of them that they completely covered the sky and resembled a steel cloud. The rain of blades covered the entire earth. It remained a mystery to people whether this was a punishment from God in heaven for their sins. If this was indeed the case, then God was no better than the devil. This event took the lives of a great many people. A blogger who calls himself MC starts the broadcast. He shows the guest that she has come to his place so that they can do a live broadcast together. The guy promises to tell very interesting news to the fans. Another guy is holding a camera and recording a video. He listens to his boss's conversation, who asks the girl, whom he calls Hanil, if she has been on a shoot for some blogger before. The girl modestly replies that she has never had such an experience before. The MC reassures the girl and says that popular professions change under the influence of time and circumstances, even in a world destroyed by monsters. The blogger flexes his muscles and says that his nickname comes from the two words, monster streamer. The girl clings to the MC's hand. He continues to talk about how his profession came about. People who have lost loved ones due to monster attacks. Ordinary citizens who cannot and do not know how to resist monsters. Love and respect the profession of monster hunters very much. Thus, all the monster hunters became quite popular among ordinary people. The MC reminded that after a successful hunt, which would begin right now, the audience would be treated to a hot dance from Hanil. The girl asked not to disconnect from the air and wait for the broadcast to end. The guy who filmed all this was confused by what people are capable of in order to increase the rating of their show. The MC pointed to a tree that was visible from afar. The blogger said that the hunt would begin right now because under the tree lay a monster called Aniwan. The cameraman was not thrilled with the idea. The hunter boasted that perhaps the audience didn't understand why such a prominent figure in the world of monster hunters would choose a monster of the first danger star. He explained that there was simply no other hunter around. In addition, he asked the audience how many monster hunters there were in Korea who could defeat a first-class monster solo. Hanil jumped up high and shouted that there were exactly 86 such brilliant hunters in the entire country. The MC promised that today their number would change, increasing by 1. The hunter resolutely walked forward. The girl followed him. The operator thought that it was a bad idea to go fight a first-class monster alone without the help of another hunter. The guy said that he considered it too risky a plan. After all, without the help of other hunters, the blogger's fighting power would not be enough to win. And the monster was too big. The cameraman reminded him that the MC had gotten pretty drunk yesterday, and he should rest and gather his strength for the fight. The hunter reminded him that the boy was just filming and ordered him to shut up. Hanil added that the monster wouldn't even be able to reach and scratch such a powerful warrior, and the cameraman simply doesn't understand anything about monster hunting. The MC added that she was absolutely right, and while the operator was thinking that this was indeed a bad idea, the MC was about to show off his power, which he considered a gift from heaven itself. His hand was glowing with the red glow of activated mana. The hunter formed a fireball in his hands and was ready to attack. He emphasized that such power and courage are not given to everyone. Therefore, others who are not hunters cannot resist. The cameraman was very upset by this fact because the MC was right. This world is too cruel to people like the boy. They can die at the hands and claws of monsters, and there is nothing they can do about it. The hunter threw a fireball directly at the monster resting under a tree. An explosion rang out at that spot. Fire and flames erupted where the ball hit the monster. Against the background of the fire, Hanil happily jumped up next to the hunter, who was showing off his powerful muscles, and addressed the audience, saying that they were probably surprised by such power and strength, which they were seeing for the first time. Suddenly, a monster jumped out of the firestorm. It attacked the blogger and the girl. The MC instantly reacted to the danger and managed to grab the girl by the waist and swim to the side, avoiding the monster's attack. The girl looked at the attacking creature in fear. Hanil began to panic and asked MC to do something, otherwise they could die. The hunter replied that he did not know what to do in such a situation. With a wild roar, the monster towered over the frightened girl and the confused hunter. The operator panicked and was afraid to even move, lest he provoke a new attack from the monster. The creature rose on its hind legs and with a powerful blow threw the girl away. The guy with the camera begged the hunter to intervene and do something with the monster. The MC was not going to enter into a fair fight with the monster. The cameraman watched the MC run away. The boy asked the blogger to come back and fight the monster. The hunter said that the cameraman had been assigned the role of bait and that he would be back soon. The monster had already approached the guy with the camera. The cameraman still couldn't believe that the hunter had abandoned him and decided to use him as bait to break away from the pursuit. Getting into the car, the MC thanked the cameraman for his work. He admitted that it was better for such an outstanding hunter to survive than for a scoundrel who could bring no benefit to humanity. As the fugitive apologized to the cameraman, with whom he had been in many different places, the boy recalled a scene from his childhood. His father told him that God was always watching over him and would protect him when needed. The boy was running away from the monster. He tried to remember his father's instructions completely and believe in them, but he couldn't concentrate on faith right now. Instead, he thought about death and the last moment. The boy prepared to die because the feeling that God was still present in his life had completely left him. Unexpectedly for the boy himself, a strange radiance enveloped his body and he flew high into the air. The young man looked at his hand in surprise. It was still shining. The guy could not understand what had happened to him and how he had survived. An inscription appeared on his hand. Translated, it meant that God was very surprised. The boy was still wondering if all this was really happening to him, if he was dead or just sleeping. At that moment, the monster attacked him. A powerful paw with sharp claws rushed towards the young man's head. The surprised monster sat in the middle of the clearing, completely alone. The creature could not believe that the victim, which was almost in its clutches, could escape. And to do it so quickly, the boy was hiding behind a tree. He was completely focused on the monster that was looking for him. The young man tried to somehow follow the behavior of the enemy in order to be able to plan his movements in the future. A message popped into the boy's head from someone who introduced himself as a god. The message was about popcorn. The boy realized that this god was simply watching people die. Surprised by this behavior of the unknown god, the boy realized that his backpack had strangely become much heavier and larger. The backpack's amazing metamorphosis distracted him from thoughts about the monster. He looked confusedly at the various weapons and supplies in the backpack. The guy remembered how, before the filming began, the hunter had thrown him the backpack because the guy was very worried and asked for some kind of protection. The boy grabbed a sapper's shovel and attacked the vile monster. The young man hoped that armed, and with the support of a strange deity, he would be able to deal with the monster and defeat it. The shovel hit the monster right in the head. However, it did not bring any noticeable result. The creature only became even more angry with its victim. For the boy, the real battle with the monster was different from the stories. Meanwhile, the creature lifted a huge stone from the ground and, gathering its strength, threw it towards the enemy with a loud roar. The force of the impact was enough to send the boy flying high into the air and somersaulting to the side. He couldn't understand what he had done wrong, because he had been preparing for such an event for a long time. The boy was born without natural abilities. He put a lot of effort into developing physically and studied many strategies of hunters who hunted monsters and saved people. And now he couldn't just die, after all his efforts, at the hands of some monkey, even if it was in the form of a monster. A message had surfaced saying that God was applauding the boy, but the boy paid no attention to the information and messages that were strangely echoing in his head. There was no time to be distracted by hallucinations. He had to defeat the monster. The young man gathered his strength. He quickly maneuvered around the monster and found himself behind it. This was the last chance to deal a fatal blow to the enemy, because from behind the monster is most vulnerable. The spear, which the boy was armed with, went deep into the leg of the monster. A loud roar tore the air. The young man drove the spear deep and blood flowed down the legs of the monster. None of the opponents was going to give in. Wild rage filled the monster. The ape-like creature stood on its hind legs and was about to strike with all the power of its opponent. The boy seized the opportunity and struck the monster with his spear right in the chest. The monster lay dead on the ground. The tip of a spear was sticking out of its back. Viewers watched live as the cameraman killed the monster. People were shocked to see only the cameraman's hand, which fell out, but was still working. The boy lay with his arms outstretched, next to the monster. The newly minted hunter could not believe that he had managed to defeat such a powerful opponent. It did not seem like a dream. Moreover, he felt strong. A new message appeared before his eyes. It said that the god was pleased with the result, and he was going to call another one. The boy felt himself filled with power. The viewer couldn't believe that a novice had defeated a monster without the support of a hunter or other assistant. She asked that someone finally write that it was a fake. After all, an ordinary person can't do that. A group of young people watched the result of the battle between the boy and the monster. They also believed that an ordinary person could not do it, so it was worth quickly posting this video on the internet for public access. The young man looked at the tablet, which displayed the correspondence of the spectators. He could not believe that his fight with the monster was broadcast live. Everyone who watched the battle considered it a real phenomenon. Still in a state of shock, the boy noticed that the number of viewers and views was increasing. At the same time, 3 gods were watching him. The hunter felt his strength and confidence grow. The boy did reach out to his new fans. He apologized for not being able to respond to their comments right away. He would definitely respond to all fans later, but he was a bit busy right now. It was heartwarming to think that the prominent hunter blogger who had been abandoned to his fate had been detained by the police in Seoul. He would be punished for taking a dig at such a crucial moment. The guy felt no pity for the MC at all. He left him alone in danger, and so he disgraced himself on camera in front of the whole world. Now his fate is to rot in prison, serving his sentence. He was distracted from his thoughts by the thought of Hanil, whom he had lost sight of since the monster attacked her. The hunter tried to remember the direction in which the girl's body had flown. The boy saw the girl's body lying nearby. New messages arriving on his device reported the god's concern for his condition. The camera was still filming Hanil, who was lying on the ground. The gods advised them to stop and get away from the scene. The hunter thought that the gods were no different from ordinary people, spectators. The boy was approaching the body of the girl, who was lying unconscious. He understood that there was nothing comical about the situation. It was hardly suitable for broadcasting. The girl was alive. At least no traces of blood were found. As they approached the girl's body, the messages became more incomprehensible and strange. Some of the gods were very interested, some were excited by what they saw in the lens. The rescue team was approaching. Now the conscience of the newly minted hunter was clear, and he would leave Kanil in the care of rescue specialists. The boy was about to head to the city. One of the rescuers approached him and asked if he was Choi Kang-sik. The guy confirmed that was his name. The man replied that he was amazed that the hunter had single-handedly defeated such a dangerous enemy. Choi said he was just lucky. He had doubts that his true story would be believed. So he preferred to just accept that he was just lucky. The rescuer allowed him to continue filming, but asked him not to interfere with his work. Choi thanked the man and assured him that he would be careful and not interfere with the rescue operation. Men with weapons in their hands approached the monster's body. Their task was to remove the monster's body. Choi continued to film the rescuer's actions. The rescue team surrounded the monster, which was still lying on the ground. One of the men reported that the monster was still alive. The order to open fire was to follow after the commander's signal. Meanwhile, another group of rescuers found the girl lying unconscious near the scene. Medics rushed to her to provide first aid to the victim of the monster's claws. Choi explained to the new viewers that the main goal of the rescuers' work is to extract the core, which is located inside the body of any monster. In the body of the creature, the core of an unknown substance is the source of power. If you don't manage to extract the core from the monster's body in a short period of time, the monster may respawn. The monster can only be killed permanently by removing the core. Distracted by his explanation to the audience, Choi didn't notice when a strange purple substance began to emanate from Hanil's body and the rescuer who was next to her. It flowed from the girl's ears and eyes and rose into the air. A strange creature appeared before the boy, emerging from the substance secreted from the victim's body. Choi was surprised that a new monster had appeared before him so quickly. The boy was confused and prepared for a new fight. The young man made the assumption that he was facing a toxic. This is a monster with 1 star. Under his control is control over deadly poisons and substances. He hides in the bodies of the wounded. This is a very cunning and dangerous monster. It waits for its new victims and attacks when other living creatures approach the victims. In this way, The monster increases the number of its victims. The rescue team was about to leave the scene. The commander ordered the car to start and prepare to retreat. The men were going to remove the core from the monster's body and get away, leaving the injured people behind. Choi was sure that he would not be abandoned in such a situation, because the rescue team was not a novice, and they had extensive experience in such operations. Everything that had just happened was not new to them. The young man was not going to be a defenseless victim. He was preparing to fight back against the monster and save Hanil and the man who had been attacked. Choi chose a gas burner to destroy the monster. The creature began to run away, as it could not tolerate high temperatures. The guy suggested that the monster stay and feel the fire on his own skin. The rescuers scolded the guy, believing that he would burn the bodies of people, and they would have nothing to give to the relatives of the deceased. Choi assured them that if the men dared to help him, rather than stand by and wait, they would have the opportunity to save the lives of these people. He believed that he had to do something to save the people. The guy ran to the rescue vehicle. He needed a fire extinguisher. At the same time, he thought about the outsiders, the spiritual monsters. For them, the main source of food was the human spirit. The toxin will kill slowly in order to extract as much life energy from its victims as possible. But if you neutralize the poison the monster used, you can save its victims. To do this, you need to wash the substance from the body. Choi Kang-sik doesn't know how to give up and do nothing. He has already calculated everything, and now he has a specific goal. The guy could not help but take advantage of this opportunity and get into the top monster hunters. The young man threw himself into the fire. He sought revenge for the lives of his parents, who died after the monster's attack. And for a long time, the prevailing opinion was that a simple, ordinary operator would not be able to do anything to take revenge. Cho had been trying to achieve something for many years, but he was not taken seriously enough anywhere. He was a nobody in this world, and he could not even gather the necessary audience. There was no influence to speak of. But now was a pretty good opportunity to make a statement, and he was ready to take this desperate step. The wisdom of the weak says that you need to become stronger and fight for yourself. Choi apologized to the audience for acting like a madman and causing such a big fire. But fire is the weakness of toxins. Flame neutralizes the poison, which was the main weapon of toxins. In addition, fire takes away the monster's strength and makes it weak and defenseless. And the fire extinguisher is needed to take advantage of the opportunity and save the victim while the toxic is too weak to attack. The guy understood that a monster of this type cannot move and attack at the same time. The hunter has only two options for further actions: either drop his prey and run away, or use his strength for the final battle. The substance that made up the monster began to slowly penetrate the girl's body. Choi realized that the monster would fight to the end. The girl's body slowly approached the young man. The boy was surprised that the monster was going to enter the fight without using poison. The newly minted hunter boasted to the audience that this was an indicator of the monster's intelligence. Choi swung the fire extinguisher and hit the girl. He shouted at the monster that he was a weakling and could not even fight normally and on equal terms. This coward was using the girl's body. Hanil's body fell to the ground. The message Choi received indicated that some of the gods were shocked by the boy's actions, but most believed that he had acted correctly. The boy himself believed that it was the right choice. The new message said that the guy just wanted to make excuses to someone. Choi wondered to himself how the gods could possibly know about similar situations and what they would do in such a case. The boy was walking out of the fire, carrying the body of one of the rescuers on his shoulders. The other members of the team looked at Choi in shock. The onlookers were shocked, as they thought the hunter and the others were already dead. Choi reported that the toxic simply didn't have enough time to suck the life out of people. But the only problem at this point was that he couldn't control the fire, which was starting to burn even hotter. Hanil stood up behind him. The hunter realized that the creature was still in the girl's body. He understood that if she attacked him now, he would not be able to fight back and would die with the man on his shoulders. The girl's head snapped back. The substance that made up the toxin burst out of the girl's mouth and flew high into the sky, saving her life. Choi thanked the gods for giving the monster the idea to escape. The young man carried the bodies of the rescuer and Hanil out of the fire. Fortunately, the toxic person decided to run away and leave the bodies of his victims. Both people were alive. They just needed to be taken to a medical facility. Choi thought that although he had saved people's lives, he had not been able to destroy the monster. Some people couldn't believe it, but there were definitely no monsters around right now. Choi still hoped that he would be shown on the news. He thanked everyone who watched the broadcast of the operator who became a hunter. The guy announced that broadcasts with his former boss, a hunter, would stop from that day on. The news should mention this. Choi believed that today's match would give him the opportunity to make a good impression on many spectators. Finally, he had moved out of the deadlock and his affairs began to improve. Now all that was left to do was move forward. He received a message that a new god had joined him, and the god welcomed him. People have been watching a new video posted by a cameraman who became a monster hunter only because he was persistent and dedicated a lot of time to training and exercises. The video was uploaded to the page of Am. Choi was starting a new broadcast. He looked at the number of viewers who had tuned in and realized that it was really worth it to risk his life for fame and popularity, even though he did it from the page of a former blogger. The guy said that he was currently near the hospital, where he had come to get a medical checkup. After the fight with the two monsters, he was worried that something might have happened to his body. A message from the system that came immediately after this appeal emphasized that some of the gods had become too bored. Some of the gods demanded cruelty and spectacle. Choi saw journalists and reporters standing at the checkpoint, which was a barrier at the entrance to the hospital courtyard. He didn't want to see them because it could cause a lot of unnecessary problems. Yesterday, journalists and correspondents from various local publications hounded him all day, asking questions about whether he really had superpowers, and whether he was really able to defeat Aniwan with his bare hands. The boy managed to avoid an unwanted meeting with reporters, but fate presented him with a new test. The place where Choi's house was supposed to stand was in ruins. Monsters destroyed the boy's home. He saw a crowd of frightened people further down the street. Medics and rescue teams working at the scene of the emergency were rescuing people and providing assistance to the injured. Calls for help were heard everywhere. The young man lowered his head. He felt hopeless. Now the monsters attacked the city. He was taken by this world, where monsters attack, taking human lives and destroying people's homes. The gods paid no attention to the boy. They longed for battle. The new message said that one of the gods had disconnected from the viewing. Choi pondered this question as well. He was curious and confused about who these gods were, who were constantly watching him and demanding spectacles. He felt himself begin to lose some of his strength. This was due to the fact that the more gods that looked at him, the more power he gained. Choi realized that the best way to be the center of attention was to fight monsters. The boy remembered stories about numerous heroes from the mythology of peoples around the world. These heroes, with the help of some patron god, won victories over monsters and beasts and possessed extraordinary strength. Choi thought about his future life. What would happen to him? What would be his future fate? The system reported that the gods were increasingly dissatisfied with the boy's behavior. Some of them were tired, some were angry. Choi didn't hear an unknown man approach him. The stranger asked what the boy was doing here and why he was so sad. The man asked if the young man was the same blogger who had defeated two monsters on live broadcast. Choi agreed. He said that a few days ago he was just a regular cameraman, and today he is so famous that even the famous streamer John Seong-han recognized him. It was strange. Another stranger appeared behind the streamer with a camera. The host began to talk about a meeting with a celebrity who had recently suddenly burst into the news and caused a lot of noise. The man asked viewers not to switch channels, as he would be back after a short commercial break. Choi realized that the man was a streamer to the core. But he wasn't too surprised. Meanwhile, John turned to Choi and asked if he was willing to die chasing monsters and grabbing as much fame as possible. The guy denied it, and thought to himself that after the cameras were turned off, a person becomes real. The man was angry because of the boy's disrespectful attitude towards him. He shouted and argued that everyone should know the famous Cho Se-up-han. Choi asked what exactly the streamer wanted from him. Cho asked what the guy was mumbling. Choi asked how many viewers the streamer currently had on his channel. He emphasized that he now had more viewers than the man, and he was curious about what the man was trying to achieve. The man said that he was sure that the guy's fame was just luck, because he didn't know how to use superpowers, but simply pretended to be such a cool monster hunter. And in his opinion, this was true. Choi reminded that the commercial break on Cho's show was delayed, and it's time to get back on the air because people will start to tune out of his broadcast. Cho growled at his cameraman because you have to take your anger out on someone. The streamer gave instructions to do his job properly and not get distracted by trifles, otherwise he would be fired. The guy emphasized that the streamer should not worry about the commercial break because unlike his cameraman, Choi's camera worked and captured everything that was needed, and the broadcast was not interrupted. The viewers enjoyed it. Choi continued the broadcast, confident that people would be interested in watching the hunter operator's broadcast. He emphasized that it was very interesting to see the real face of Cho Seop Han. After that, the system reported that another god had joined the viewing. Choi felt his strength increase. It was very easy to get Cho out of his mind, and it was worth it, because this way the rating only increased. Cho began to make excuses. He said that it was just really good advice from an experienced streamer to a newbie. Everything else was misunderstood and misinterpreted by viewers. The guy replied that strategic advice exists for a reason. Thus, it should help avoid various mistakes and misunderstandings. But this time, the effect was completely opposite. The vast majority of monsters do not exchange information with each other. But people not only exchange information, but also create strategies for fighting and behavior in general. Although there are people who prefer silence. And it's not possible to develop your own strategy for each monster. You just have to be prepared and constantly improve your fighting skills and techniques for the fight. Cho realized that he needed to pull himself together so as not to embarrass himself even more. The essence of the Monster Hunter broadcast is to fight monsters. You need to distract the audience by destroying at least one monster. The man pushed the boy away with his shoulder and told him to watch him carefully, because he was going to defeat the monster single-handedly and show true professionalism. Cho asked the young man not to be afraid and not to get tangled up underfoot. Mana energy appeared on the man's hand. He looked at Choi and told him that the guy was not a real hero, but was just pretending to be one. In reality, he was a coward, and he was just lucky to be in the right situation. The boy wished his opponent good luck. He was sure that Cho was an order of magnitude stronger than Yu Ilam. But the man had a simple character. Choi intended to find the monster that destroyed his home. This way, he could gain the support of even more gods, and thus have more strength to confront monsters and monsters. A monster peeked out from around the corner of the house. It carefully watched the people and their quarrel while preparing to attack, taking advantage of the latter's delay. Cho neutralized the monster with a single movement of his hand. The monster lay on the ground. Lightning still flashed on its body from the impact. The man asked Choi if he was too slow, because that was the basis of the basis. Suddenly, another monster jumped out of the ambush and jumped at Cho with lightning speed. Cho did not notice the danger because he was bragging about how skillfully he had dealt with the attacker. Choi shouted to him to be careful. A powerful blow knocked Cho away from the monster, which landed behind him. Choi realized that it was pride that had ruined the man, who was very self-confident in his abilities. Talented fools are too safe and self-confident. The monster was standing over the boy. The monster was very big. Choi thought that this was the monster that destroyed his house. He asked the monster if he knew what had happened to his friend's ass, whom the boy had beaten. The monster struck the hunter, but he dodged the blow. He was not going to wait until he was defeated. Running away from the attacker, Choi tried to understand what exactly had increased his strength. The boy tried to find a place where he could hide from his pursuer for a short time. There he would think about his further course of action and draw up a rough plan or strategy for the battle. Cho regained consciousness amidst the ruins. He could not understand what had happened to him and where the boy and the monster had gone. Suddenly, he heard a wild roar, the likes of which he had never heard before in his life. The man ran to the place where the noise of the battle could be heard. He could not believe that there was a real battle going on between the boy and the monster that was roaring so powerfully. At the battle site, he saw a monster lying against a wall. The creature was dead. A large wooden cross was protruding from the monster's body. Cho stood over the defeated enemy. He told Cho that God had helped him. During the battle, a critical situation arose for the hunter. Choi miscalculated the enemy's strength. The monster turned out to be too strong and hardy for the boy. The hunter hid behind a pillar of the temple. While he was thinking that the monster would find his hiding place sooner or later, Choi noticed a large cross hanging on the wall. He immediately realized that the cross was a perfect weapon to help defeat the monster. Choi grabbed the heavy cross with both hands and stood over the monster. The creature only had time to turn its head and see its opponent. The next moment, Choi jumped high with the cross in his hands and aimed the cross, which was flowing with mana energy, straight into the monster's head. This victory was to prove to all his opponents that he was not just a lucky guy, but a true hunter. Cho glared at the boy who was watching something on the camera. The man was outraged that the hunter had used a cross as a weapon in his fight against the monster. Choi was more interested in the audience's reaction. The graphs indicated that the desperate story of an ordinary man with no abilities but a strong willpower won the hearts of the audience. For the average person, there was nothing more interesting than such a story. Choi reminded his followers and viewers that this time he also managed to survive and survive. This time it was easier to fight the monster because the hunter had the support of the viewers, the gods. He also thanked all the viewers of the channel for their support. He asked them to stay with him the next time he finds a new opponent. Everyone who wants to can follow his progress as a hunter. The system reported that some of the gods were interested in his person. Another god asked about the boy's future plans in the field of monster hunting. And some of the gods were impressed by Choi's adventurism. Cho started shouting and arguing that he could handle the monster better than the guy. The man simply turned to the first monster to make sure it was dead, and the monkey couldn't do anything to him. Choi asked why the streamer had thought of it so much. The man suggested that they decide which of them is stronger in a duel. This would finally put an end to their quarrels. Choi did not understand why they were fighting. Choi asked on camera why they were fighting each other. It distracted them from their main task, which was to fight the monsters and save the lives of innocent people who might be harmed by the monsters. Cho assured him that he simply wanted to invite the boy to a collaborative hunt between two monster hunters. The following week, a group hunt was to be held involving the best hunters from all over Korea. It was there that they would be able to find out who among them was the best at hunting monsters. Choi was interested because if even Cho attached such importance to this event, then it was truly significant for the hunter. They started talking about the best monster hunter. The guy really wanted to know her name. The man asked if the guy really wanted to know who she was. Choi burst in, a glutton. The gods were also interested in this information. Cho replied that the hunter with the best abilities and the most advanced monster fighting skills. Her name was Kim Seo-yoon. Choi thought that just having the opportunity to broadcast together was already an achievement. He agreed to Cho's offer. Although the boy had some doubts, he was very serious. He simply could not miss such an opportunity without using it for his own publicity. Choi arrived at the abandoned Gimpo airport. Cho had shown him the place. It was extremely dangerous and had long been abandoned by humans who had not used it due to frequent monster attacks. This place reminded the boy of his childhood experiences associated with the death of his parents and the void it left on the ground and in the boy's heart. He was interrupted by Cho, who ordered Choi to follow him and not stick to the ruins of the abandoned airport. They were met by a girl. Cho began to apologize to her for making her wait. The whole reason was the boy, who had never seen abandoned buildings of this scale in his life. Cho's verbosity was annoying. The girl replied that nothing terrible had happened. But that wasn't what surprised Choi. The girl was just hanging in the air. She truly had extraordinary talents. Using her gift in everyday life required a lot of energy. In the boy's opinion, this hunter was really very different from the other hunters he had met and heard about. Meanwhile, the girl asked Choi if he would continue to pester her, if he would finally say hello. Choi apologized, but the hunter girl rebuked him. She asked him to be very careful while hunting, and added that he should not even think of calling her sister or goddess. Now they had to get down to business. The program she was proposing was 3 days and 2 nights long. If the boy started to doubt himself, he could just go home now so as not to waste time. Cho stared at the girl in surprise. He simply hadn't expected the program to be so long. Choi thought the man had already given up mentally and lost the competitive spirit that had driven him from the very beginning. The guy extended his hand to the huntress as a sign that he was happy with the hunting conditions. The girl looked at him approvingly and suggested they start right away so as not to be distracted by extraneous matters. Choi promised that he wouldn't let her down. The girl replied that she hoped for his honesty and that these weren't just empty words thrown to the wind by a boastful boy who wants to prove something to someone or flatter his pride. Messages from the system emphasized that some of the gods simply couldn't wait for it all to begin. One god spoke openly about the excitement that gripped him. The gods were waiting for this action to begin. 2 days later, they were already in a field camp set up specifically for the upcoming hunt. Choi looked at the girl hunter with admiration as she once again surprised him with her manners. The girl studied all the data received in detail before starting the monster hunt. She carefully checked the schedules and planned the operation responsibly, working out all the moments that could affect the event. The hunter asked if Choi wanted to join her team or work under her command. The guy thanked her, but declined the offer because he considered himself more of a monster hunter than a soldier. The girl regretted that Choi had refused. At the same time, she watched Cho's reaction, who could not believe that an amateur boy had received an offer from a famous hunter and even dared to refuse. The hunter got down to business. She told me that the number of wild boars in the abandoned airport had increased dramatically. This situation had recently begun to take on quite frightening proportions and was threatening the city. She added that few people knew about it. Cho asked if she planned to monopolize the hunting grounds. The hunter asked not to twist her words because she did not intend to do what Cho was thinking. The official statement was postponed until later, because the investigation was postponed until later. Choi concluded that the investigation was now completed or simply closed. The girl said that there were about 100 monsters. Her team has been working tirelessly all this time to discover whether there are any more unpleasant surprises and unwanted traps in this area, hidden from the eyes of the average person. Choi looked at the cameraman, who must have had a hard time. He sympathized with their plight, remembering how he himself had worked as a cameraman for Yu Lam. At that time, he had been a scout for the hunter. Alone, he climbed the rocks in search of monsters to film another video for his boss. All the while, danger pursued him, and he was sometimes on the verge of life and death. He emphasized that he had already dealt with the Bunalov. The gist of the matter was that these creatures applied the rampage to each other, like a buff to a teammate. The rampage itself was essentially no different from an ordinary cow, but the more individuals there were together, the more difficult it was to deal with them. Cho suggested waiting until the herd had rampaged through one bull, and then they could take advantage of the animal's weakness. The man asked if the novice hunter knew the true danger of these animals. He asked the huntress if she even heard what the boy was saying. Wouldn't it be better to kill the buffalo separately? The girl assured that it would be very slow. During this time, other monsters would appear, and then the situation would become much more complicated and could get out of control. CHO boasted that one of his shots would kill one buffalo. The boy thought it was a good idea, considering the fighting prowess of Cho and the huntress. The girl probably suggested hunting together. The girl replied that it would be difficult for Cho to participate in the hunt. The guy thought that he would once again play the role of bait for hunting, but everything had already been decided for him. He assured his companions that everything would be fine and that he was ready to make a possible contribution to the common cause. He understood that the collage broadcast was over, and now he could openly talk about what he thought about it. And now he was free to choose how he would act in this situation. The huntress engaged the buffalo in a fight. She attacked it with dark energy. Choi was delighted with the girl's appearance and the talents she possessed. These were her two strengths. Choi couldn't understand how he could hunt for so long using the same battle strategy. He didn't forget to greet the spectators, who couldn't believe that such outstanding and strong hunters had joined forces. His broadcasts were unpredictable and always attracted the attention of followers and subscribers. Choi's hunting methods were different from those of ordinary monster hunters. This should have played into his hands. The system messages started coming in right after he started broadcasting. The new god joined in. He stayed for a while but became very interested in Choi's personality as a newly minted hunter. The boy thought that the godlike audience was hungry for something new, and he was going to satisfy their curiosity. He and his companions had figured out the correct strategy for fighting the buffalo, but two problems remained. The first major problem was the buffalo buffs, which stacked on top of each other and were thus amplified. A buffalo couldn't apply the buff to itself, but it could do so to its kin. The biggest danger was that the herd could concentrate its efforts on one buffalo, and it was unknown how strong this animal would be and what danger it would pose to others. And they kept themselves ready. The buffalo's recent territorial fight had made them even more aggressive. The hound had not let the boy down, and trouble was about to begin. He asked if the spectators were ready to start hunting with him. Today's hunting lesson could illustrate the phrase, "Keep your rear guard safe." The huntress attacked one of the buffaloes, firing an energy ball at it, which shattered against the animal's horns. This stopped the monster for a while. Choi saw a huge buffalo running towards Cho. The guy asked the audience not to worry about the girl and Cho because they were capable and talented hunters, veterans in hunting and confronting monsters. The guy began to worry about himself because he didn't have any extraordinary powers, but he was going to confront a herd of buffaloes, which at that very moment were buffing one of the largest males, improving all of its characteristics. A huge buffalo stood in front of the girl, who was high in the air and planning her next move. Before her was a powerful and dangerous opponent. Cho shouted, warning the hunter of the danger. Choi was sneaking up on a huge monster. He asked if the audience was curious why he brought a large iron door with him. He promised a prize to the audience who could solve this riddle. That person would receive the prize. He carefully looked at the huge number of messages that came to his chat. Choi was afraid to miss the right answer, but soon the winner was found. The guy asked the lucky person to write back to him later. The hunter promised to send the winner a buffalo horn, provided Choi survived the hunt. He was about to explain why he thought the door was real camouflage. The herd has buffed one of the most powerful members of its species, and they are currently resting behind it. Anatomically, buffaloes have astigmatism due to constantly looking down. A hunter hidden by the door will be able to approach the herd from the front. The buffaloes will not realize that someone is sneaking up on them, but due to their poor eyesight, they will perceive the door as part of the surrounding landscape. Choi carefully examined the huge first-rank buffalo. He understood that this monster, which was the size of a bus, was actually a simple buffalo, which had been buffed by a herd of his relatives. The hunter thought that if he had dealt with the monster monkey, he could certainly deal with the big cow. He jumped up high and lifted the door above his head to hit the monster squarely in the head. The buffalo, its horns broken, lay on the ground. However, it tried to get up on trembling legs. The boy could not believe that his blow had failed to kill the bull. Choi was going to finish the animal off. He stood over the body of the enemy. Choi understood that even the most advanced weapons were powerless against the core that was inside the monsters. Only direct attacks and the hunter's super abilities could destroy the core. The spectators looked at the buffalo lying on the ground with its tongue hanging out. They understood that only such a barbaric method could defeat the monster. In fact, the situation was not the best at the moment. Choi managed to kill only one of the buffaloes. The other hunters were already very tired from fighting the monsters. They could not defeat the huge buffalo, which seemed to regenerate right in the fight. The key to victory lay in the strength of Kim Seo-yoon and Cho Seo-pan. If they retreated even a step, the buffaloes would definitely trample Choi. It was necessary to quickly neutralize the herd to deprive the main monster of strength. He received a message that some of the gods were very angry with this way of fighting. One god was very angry, and some suggested fighting the whole herd at once. Some considered the boy a weakling. Choi understood that he had no right to lose control of the situation now. If he gave up and ran away, he would lose the audience. He needed to come up with a method and a strategy. Meanwhile, one of the gods made a serious decision. Choi received a donation. He himself did not expect such a turn of events. A speck shone on the head of the buffalo he had defeated. The guy reached out and pulled out a shovel. It was the donation. He tried to lift the shovel, but it was too heavy for him. Some of the gods openly mocked the boy who tried to lift the weapon he had been given. Cho knew that this was no ordinary weapon. He raised his weapon high above his head, but no miracle happened. The shovel did not turn into a sword. This was not a game. He had no other choice, and he had to act as the situation demanded. He would kill the Zeros with a shovel. Choi had to rush to help his companions. They were both very tired and exhausted. Kim hoped that reinforcements would arrive soon, but they were delayed and would not arrive here soon. After all, they sensed competition. The boy decided to test the shovel on the nearest animal. His will and spirit were strengthened by the gods' faith in him and their blessing, which they used to strengthen him. A stone fell from the severed head of the buffalo. Cho could not have imagined that the shovel would be so sharp. Some of the gods were proud of having helped the new hunter so much in the fight against monsters. The number of gods, spectators, increased to 6 people. They supported the boy, and he, in turn, felt his strength growing. The shovel turned out to be not such a useless thing, which can only be used to dig beds. A general elation and a sense of his power overwhelmed Choi. He was going to kill the entire herd and thereby weaken the lead buffalo, with whom the other hunters of their collabo were now fighting. The boy attacked the animals. After the massacre of the herd, Choi noticed that his companions felt much better and easier. The monster began to weaken and could no longer attack. It was quite easy to deal with its smaller relatives. The biggest threat, in the boy's opinion, had been neutralized. Now it was necessary to prevent the remnants of the herd from giving power to a new monster. The girl hunter looked at the buffalo massacre that Choi had arranged. Cho turned to see other hunters rushing toward them. He was furious at the delay in reinforcements that had nearly cost him and Kim their lives. The man was certain that if Choi hadn't acted, they might have perished. Rows of Special Forces soldiers, clad in body armor and holding shields, moved to finish off the remnants of the buffalo herd. Monster hunters flew above the rows of warriors and suppressed the resistance of the remnants of the herd. Cho received new messages. He followed each one carefully, hoping for some profit. Some of the gods wanted to continue watching the hunt, which they perceived as a bloody entertainment. Some of the gods were very alarmed. Some were nervous. The boy could not understand the reasons for such strange behavior of his patrons. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound that distracted him from his thoughts. He saw the torn bodies of the hunters still hanging in the air. Choi couldn't see. What exactly had done this to the hunters? However, one of them gathered his last strength and shouted for his comrades to be careful. Choi saw a huge humanoid monster in the sky. It was this new monster, which the boy had never seen even in pictures, that caused the death of the hunters. The boy remembered his childhood. He still couldn't forget that day. Little Choi came home and found his mother in the kitchen cooking dinner. He still thought that his mother was the best in the whole world. The younger sister met the boy when he entered the next room. She was bragging about the new dress that her caring and always attentive father had bought her. But then tragedy struck. With a metallic crunch, metal blades began to fall from the sky. They tore apart people's bodies. After this event, the entire city was wiped off the face of the earth. Until now, this phenomenon has remained a mystery. The boy held the body of his younger sister in his arms. He begged her to wake up. That day, a rank 5 monster took the lives of his family and loved ones. He would never forget this ghostly vision. Choi laughed. He understood that this was the same monster that had killed his family. Some of the gods said goodbye to the daredevil, while others suggested that the hunter's remains be cremated. The audience could not believe that this was the end. Choi stood in front of the monster that was hanging in the air. The boy smiled, because he had been waiting for this day for a long time. He tightly gripped the shovel in his hands. Choi was burning with the desire to avenge his family. The monster attacked first. The hunter dodged the enemy's lightning attacks. He mocked the monster and asked to take their duel more seriously. The boy lived only for revenge. He rushed to attack the Zero Blade. That was the name of this monster. This opponent, unlike all the previous ones, was able to think and improve his behavior. He thought and learned. Defeating him would be no easy task. Choi had thought through a lot of simulations before the battle. This time, he needed to actualize all his skills. The monster was supposed to die at his hands today. The gods split into 2 camps when they realized the boy's plan. The hunter dodged the monster's attack once again. The special feature of the Zero Blade attack was that it could generate as many blades and limbs as there were enemies in front of it. Theoretically, it could not be defeated. But Choi was going to disprove this theory on his own and show it was wrong. Today, they were alone. The guy hit his opponent with a shovel. He dealt a very powerful blow to his opponent. Choi saw that with God's help and armed with a shovel gifted by one of the gods, he could defeat such a formidable opponent. The audience also looked on in bewilderment as the hunter confronted a level 5 monster. The hunter gathered his strength and decided to strike a decisive blow. But something extraordinary happened. The monster was running away from the battlefield. The guy shouted at him and demanded to return and continue the fight and finish everything today. Choi was chasing the monster. The hunter was clutching a shovel tightly in his hands. He was shouting angrily at the monster, demanding that it stop. The creature that had killed a huge number of people was now simply running away from the boy. The path to retreat for Zero Blade was blocked by Cho. He activated his abilities and streams of energy played around his hands. Choi shouted and warned the man not to do anything stupid. However, the brazen man did not listen. Cho Seop-han said he was not going to share the winner's laurels. He called himself the Korean Thor, the god of thunder and lightning. Lightning bolts shot in the direction of the monster, but it did not have the effect the man had hoped for. The transformations happened to the monster's body very quickly. 2 additional limbs appeared in one breath. Now, the Zero Blade had to fight 2 enemies at once, so its strength and anatomy were modified accordingly. The guy was afraid that if it continued like this, the monster would increase the number of blades, and at the same time, Choi's chances of victory would decrease. The novice hunter realized that it was worth simply dodging the enemy's attacks. Meanwhile, Cho was thinking about what he had done wrong again. Choi appeared before him, having broken away from the monster. The man assured him that it was an accident. He had no intention of setting up his partner. Now Cho offered compensation. Cho hit Cho, and now he was lying on the ground in front of him. The guy said that he didn't believe the wall's words, and that buffalo shit smelled better than Cho's lying mouth. The gods reacted differently to what had just happened. The number of gods after the battle had grown to 11. Choi felt an elevation and improvement in his condition, unlike how he had begun this joint hunt. The boy lay in the hospital. He still couldn't believe that his encounter with the Zero Blade had happened so quickly. The battle showed that even a level 5 monster wasn't as invincible as it seemed. Thanks to the shovel that one of the gods had given the boy, he would surely destroy this enemy and avenge the death of his relatives. Outside the window, he heard the cries of crows, which had been screaming very loudly since early morning. Choi thought about how monsters were classified these days. Some were very dangerous, bringing death and destruction to wherever they lived, or wherever they visited to feed themselves or satisfy their thirst for destruction. Other monsters were not dangerous. The second type of creatures were not particularly interested in people, so such monsters were called harmless. Such monsters included the Okarkal, which could predict. The cry of the left head of the Okarkal testified to troubles that were soon to come. The right head indicated the well-being and prosperity of the area or an individual. Now, fortunately, the right head was crying. The system messages again said that one of the gods was bored. One of them suggested that they leave the streamer and find someone better. Choi thought about how much gods were like ordinary people. The guy decided to check his equipment. He took out his tablet and started scrolling through the news to find out what had happened in the world while he was in the hospital. He wasn't so interested in finding out the results of the diagnosis. The news said that the Zero Blade had escaped to the south of the country and was now hiding in that region. The monster was not stupid. It specifically retreated to those places to ambush the hunters pursuing it. The battle of an ordinary operator who had only recently become a novice hunter was unprecedented in history. However, even despite fleeing the battlefield, the Zero Blade was still invincible. Without the help and support of the gods and their donors, Choi would not have been able to withstand a level 5 monster. He would have probably died without being able to achieve anything. He would not even be able to reach the monster. The situation became more catastrophic and unmanageable after Cho Seop-han entered the battle. But even without his intervention, Choi would have certainly lost to Zero Blade. Yet he managed to survive after a direct confrontation. Judging by his condition after the battle with an almost invincible enemy, he had not even been injured. But there was only one thing that bothered him. It was the question of where the shovel he had received from the gods was. Some of the gods were very surprised that the boy had remembered the artifact he had supposedly lost. Choi asked where his shovel was. One of the gods reassured his comrade. Some of the gods suggested that the boy get up and try to find the shovel himself if he was so worried about it, and worried about its disappearance. He couldn't understand why the other things were in place. The guy decided to distract himself from thoughts about the shovel and began broadcasting directly from the hospital. He addressed the audience and promised to answer all their questions that they had prepared for him. The first was a very painful question for him. He honestly answered that he had no extraordinary abilities. The reason for his courageous duel with the Zero Blade was the desire for revenge, which motivated him greatly. He calmly told about the death of his family. The story of his past really shook everyone who watched him. He was not the only child who became an orphan early due to the attack of monsters. And that's why he didn't give up. Choi appealed to everyone who watched him now, or will watch him in the future, to never lose hope and faith in their own strength. Even in the most difficult circumstances, there is still room for their own will. He was just an ordinary person, like everyone who is watching him now. And if it worked for him, it will definitely work for everyone else. God asked if Choi had a conscience. One of the gods praised the boy's acting skills. The hunter did not mention the gods or talk about how he had enlisted their support. He thought that few people would believe him anyway. Suddenly, someone entered the room. From his place, Choi could only see a dark silhouette. The man in the white doctor's coat apologized for interrupting his broadcast. Choi thought that something had changed in his body after all, if the doctor had come to him so quickly. So the doctor had an urgent matter. The doctor asked if the boy really considered himself an ordinary person. After all, an ordinary person, even if well-trained, would not be able to attack a level 5 monster armed only with a shovel. The man assured that Choi's body was fine. The guy was glad that the intervention of the gods had not changed his body. The doctor only noted the good level of physical fitness of his patient and assured of the complete absence of extraordinary powers. The doctor said that the boy was in a special hospital for monster diseases. Choi didn't immediately understand what the man meant until the doctor started talking about the services and conditions of their specialized hospital. He emphasized that they take excellent care of the patients they treat thanks to their 15 years of experience and extremely expensive and high-quality equipment, as well as the efforts of the staff. The man could tell from Choi's expression that he had gone a little too far. The boy said he was glad the doctor was so observant. The doctor emphasized that the boy should have understood what he was getting into. The doctor asked if Choi was feeling okay. Now he had to have a serious talk with him. The man said that many of the doctors wanted to conduct a study of the boy's body and organ functions. The doctor said that while the boy was unconscious, a couple of tests were conducted on him. The diagnostic results showed that he was an ordinary person. But some of the management doesn't really believe it. They want to make sure. After hearing the message from the system, they fell upon the boy. The gods were very unhappy with what they wanted to do to the boy. Some of them emphasized that they could deal with very interesting doctors. Choi asked the doctor if he knew where the shovel had gone. The man replied that the management was very curious about what kind of strange object it was, so it was sent to the laboratory, where specialists would take care of it. The novice hunter was angry with the leadership because it acted as usual. Instead of offering any reward or encouraging the young hunter, it decided to take his artifact. The medic added that he had forgotten to say something else. He reported that something interesting and unusual had been found. He threw the unknown object into Choi's hands. The doctor said that it was a manufactured monster core. The man said that the monster's core can be called the foundation of its life. People who can resonate with the vibrations of the core can also draw energy and become an extraordinary person afterwards. Each Superman has a corresponding vibration, which gives its owner special superpowers. A person can use the power of only one type of core. If the type of core is not suitable, then he cannot use the power. Accordingly, every superhuman knows which core suits him and matches his abilities. But Choi was not suited to any of the previously known cores. In other words, he might be suited to the core of a monster that has never been killed before. Choi replied that it was called giving a last hope that might not come true. The doctor asked if the boy was intrigued. After all, he could gain extraordinary strength and unleash abilities. Superpowers are just one way to end Zero Blade. And in this case, extraordinary abilities do not play a primary role, but they are a very significant contribution to this cause. Choi asked if he could be discharged from the hospital and go home. The doctor asked him to be careful and come back in exactly 1 month for a re-diagnosis and health check. The man promised that nothing would stop him in his search for a suitable core for Choi. He would search all the databases and corners of this world to find the core and release the power hidden within it with the help of this little one. Choi asked why the doctor was so interested in this, because it made him a little nervous. The doctor said that he saw hidden potential in the boy, and he really wanted to. For the boy to gain extraordinary powers. Choi said he wasn't interested in it, but promised to come back in a month to check on his health. The guy arrived at the Monster Fighters Association, which was an international organization that organized monster fighting and controlled everything related to this activity. Humanity created this organization to counter the threat of monster invasion. Choi had often been here when he worked for his former boss. Usually, after a battle, there would be some loot left over that could be traded. The spoils were the remains of monsters, which could be recycled and used. Buffalo skin and horns could be used to make hunting gear. Even monster meat was used in the food industry. Choi decided to make some money fighting monsters. It was a good way to make money if you knew how to organize things properly. The guy approached the cashier, where a young girl was sitting. Choi asked where he could pick up his reward. The girl couldn't believe her eyes and asked if he was really a hunter-operator. Everyone in the hall paid attention to the newly minted hunter, who had become famous in such a short time. Some were amazed that he looked like an ordinary boy, the kind of guy you see on the streets. Choi ignored the comments of some of the audience, because there is always a creep in any place who will add fuel to the fire. Instead of arguing, the cameraman hunter introduced himself to the audience. The boy returned to the cashier and asked to be paid for the monsters he had killed. The girl nodded and said that she would calculate his fate right now. The gods asked the boy to settle his affairs quickly. An unknown man in a mask with a respirator took Choi by the shoulder. He asked the guy to look at him. Choi replied that he was busy right now. The hunter-operator was not happy to be touched at such a moment. Another man who approached them said that it was impossible for an ordinary young man to frighten the Zero Blade so much that it was forced to flee to the south of the country. In his opinion, there was some deception involved. Choi was tired of hearing this. He took out his camera and began broadcasting, asking the annoying men why they didn't believe him so much that they had to question him for the truth and demand proof. The man in the mask with the respirator asked to turn off the camera. Choi asked why he didn't want to repeat his words on camera. After all, the audience would be interested in learning something new about him and the guy. The men left, and Choi turned on the broadcast directly from the Monster Suppression Association hall. He informed the viewers that he was currently awaiting a reward for completing the mission with the buffaloes and the fight with the Zero Blade. A stranger in a mask with a respirator was addressing his friend. He asked him to get out of this place, otherwise public opinion about them would be at a very low level. An example would be the situation of Cho Seop-han. The girl apologized for the long wait. She submitted documents that discussed the amount and procedure for calculating the reward for winning a battle with monsters. The guy asked if there was an error in the calculations. The reward was clearly understated, and there was no mention of the disappearance of his precious shovel. The girl replied that all questions were for the authorities, but Choi reassured her and said that he would not scold her. He wasn't going to be fooled about his reward. It couldn't just be left like that. On camera, the hunter made a statement that the Monster Slayer Association had changed its standards. Material benefits have now become more important to the association than the lives of ordinary people and those who protect them. His reward was divided among officials, and he is even being tried to be cheated of his property. The comments poured in. Someone even translated them into English. A man ran up to Choi, heaving heavily. He introduced himself as the assistant manager. The man said the reward seemed too small, but most of the proceeds from that hunt were sent to the families of the hunters who died that day in a fight with Zero Blade. The association did not create any corruption schemes. It was a forced necessity due to the rather small funding. Choi replied that compensation for hunters' families should be in the organization's internal funds department, and the association has no right to reduce hunters' payments. He was interested in who allowed his share to be taken away for payments. The assistant pointed out that Choi's comrades who had hunted with him had also received reduced payments. But the boy interrupted the official. He said that he did not know all the hunters who had arrived late to the battle that day. The man was confused. His future career depended on his decision in this situation. He mentally turned to the general manager, thinking about how to resolve the situation that had arisen. Choi waited for an explanation. A group of people, led by a man in uniform, approached them. He mocked Choi, who was hiding behind a camera. But what angered him most was that the boy decided to cause a ruckus in a sacred place that protected all of Korea. The manager looked at the man named Park Jin-chan with relief. The man received the full support of everyone present in the Hunters Hall. They unanimously sided with him and defended the assistant. The gods wondered who this man was. One of the gods thought that this man was too stingy and greedy. Proposals followed to stuff the stranger's face. Cho understood that now he had two headaches. Park Jin-chan was not a streamer, but a real monster hunter. His skills were quite mediocre, but he made up for them with his zeal and drive. There was a certain uniqueness about him, namely that he was the first to find the invasion. He was one of those who had experienced a much greater nightmare than what was happening right now. Chan led a new generation of hunters to ensure that the events of the past and all that horror would not be repeated. He now enjoyed unquestioned authority among the hunters and was considered their spiritual leader and mentor. His figure was very significant in matters of fighting monsters. Park turned to Choi and asked what the problem was. He asked if the boy really believed that he had survived to this day because of his own strength. After all, the hunters who had died had been protecting him all along. Choi laughed. Park asked if the young man was okay, or maybe he had some kind of clouding of consciousness. The boy replied that no one stood up for his family when they were dying. The guy asked what the Crane management did that day to save the lives of innocent people. The authorities that day simply dropped a missile where the monsters had broken into their world, right where Choi lived. Park said the reason was good. After all, the Zero Blade could form a huge number of swords when faced with a large number of opponents. The authorities' response was quite utilitarian. One powerful blow. Because of this attack, Choi's house turned into a continuous firestorm. And the high-tech weapon did not even hurt Zero Blade. It did not even leave a scratch on the body of the monster it was used against. It was only later that it became known that the only way to confront such a powerful level 5 monster was to engage in a one-on-one duel. This was discovered right then, and this fact was proven after the fight with Choi. The boy asked if everything was clear to the first hunter. If there were no more questions, he asked not to prevent him from receiving his well-deserved reward. Chan understood this, but he was not going to back down. He noted that Choi was right about the response to the Zero Blade attack. It was indeed wrong and incompetent. But what could change if the hunters kept repeating the mistakes of the past? The boy replied that Chan was wrong, because he was an ordinary person, not a hunter. Choi did not have any extraordinary abilities. Chan could not believe what this boy was telling him. The young man said that it was all about his perseverance. Che turned to the assistant manager. The guy said that he agreed to take the buffalo horn and his magic shovel. After that, he warned him not to touch him and let him leave the building in peace. Stunned by this address, the assistant looked at the shovel that was sticking out of the hunter operator's bag. The man said that in honor of the weapon that struck directly into the jaw of the Zero Blade, it was given the name Miu. She was named Kamosu in honor of her great ancestor. The man did not understand what the shovel was doing in the boy's hands, if at that moment it should be in the laboratory, where research and experiments would be conducted on it. Once again, the organization employee faced a dilemma. He must not hint that the association was very interested in this artifact, and moreover, that it was not going to steal it from the boy or take possession of the shovel. The assistant stopped Choi Kung-sik. He reported that the general manager asked to meet with him, and it was during the meeting that the guy was supposed to receive his full fee. In parallel with this, a number of issues were supposed to be resolved. Choi haughtily replied that he had no time for idle chatter. Added to all this were the demands of the gods to start adventures, as they were getting quite bored. The boy promised the gods that he was almost finished with his affairs. The boy heard someone calling him loudly. His former boss, for whom he worked as a cameraman, was walking towards the young man through the crowd. The former monster hunter's intentions were not very friendly. The guy recognized his former boss. However, this did not upset him too much. On the contrary, Choi hoped that the appearance of Yu Lam in the frame should increase the ratings of his broadcast. The stream should become more interesting. Amma said he would never believe that his former operator could even scare the Zero Blade, let alone make the monster run away, let alone talk. The gods were curious about what was to come next. The viewers are also stirred, and therefore the gods are becoming more and more interested. Choi's former boss was a fool, and therefore he does not understand that by provoking a conflict, he is only playing into the hands of the growth of the rating. Yu Am believed that the streamer should not have lied. But he was sure that Choi owed his success to the magic shovel, which was a completely unusual artifact. Everything began to develop very interestingly. A crowd of spectators gathered around. The word shovel was on everyone's lips. No one could understand what exactly a shovel meant in this case. The man in the mask and respirator realized that he was right not to trust the boy. Choi took a shovel in his hands and walked towards Yu Lam. The guy wondered if this was the only reason his former boss could die, and if he really didn't care about anything else in this situation. Before dying, Choi allowed himself to say a few words. Yu Il-ama was very scared. He tried to continue playing bravado. In fact, he was very scared of his former subordinate. He scared him very much because the change in his character was noticeable to the naked eye. The hunter thought that thanks to the shovel itself, even when it was enchanted, it was not possible to so skillfully fight a dangerous monster, against which it was not so easy to stand up in a duel. Choi got closer and closer to Yu Il-am. He warned the boy not to come near him, otherwise he would not vouch for himself. The boy suggested not to control himself, but to do something. He recalled how his boss had left the cameraman and the girl he had invited to blog together in danger. The man replied that it was in the past. He was given a suspended sentence and a huge fine, and now he was being forced to marry a girl he had never even met. This marriage would be arranged to make it easier to pay off the fine and debt that hung over Yu Il-ami. Choi thought, what a jerk his boss was. The hunter became more active because the court acquitted him and found him not guilty of committing the crime. The public in the group chat unanimously said that the judges had been bribed because Yu Il-am was from a wealthy family. Choi suggested that they solve everything like real men. The conditions of the duel were that the guy would not use a shovel and his opponent would use his magical powers. Only fists and nothing else. The gods were divided in their assessment of this act of the young man. Some rebuked him for his low moral principles. Others, on the contrary, were not very shocked by such a proposal. The number of spectators among the gods increased, which indicated a new renewal of the boy's strength. Choi understood that his physical strength had increased, and therefore he should be able to easily resist even without weapons. He asked the gods not to let him down. His opponent, on the other hand, insisted on fighting only with his own superpowers. He was embarrassed that in battle, he could not use his core, which gave him strength and additional protection. Yu Il-am understood that without a core, he would lose to Choi. He could not defeat the little guy in hand-to-hand combat. After all, even Choi's muscles were real. The man was afraid of the fight and did not want to be disgraced after it. The waiting and delay made Choi very angry. He had already agreed that he would fight with his bare hands, while his opponent could use the core and the powers it gave him. Yu Il-am asked him not to twist his words. He didn't mind the boy using his powers, as long as he could activate them and use them in battle. Yu Il-am promised that he would put an end to his lies today. Now he would make it clear why he was called the Fiery Sniper. The man attacked Choi. He promised that this would be the boy's last blog. Flames flew towards the young man. Choi thought that his boss had not changed a bit since their last meeting. The young man quickly slipped through the streams of fire. It was almost impossible. Yu Il-am was shocked by what he had just seen. He was amazed by the speed of his former subordinate's movements and attacks. Choi ran through the firestorm. He paid no attention to the shouts and threats of his opponent. In desperation, Amma used his signature technique, which always helped him win even in the most dangerous situations. The guy fell into a trap. His opponent believed that if the young man didn't try, he would lose now. And he would forever remain what he was in this life. An ordinary person. A cameraman who simply had to film outstanding feats. He threatened to destroy the boy and his camera. Suddenly, Choi jumped out of the fire. He raised his hand to strike and swiftly attacked his opponent. The opponent only tried to cover himself with his hand from the powerful attack. Choi worked for his former boss for exactly 3 years. During this time, he was able to thoroughly study the fighting techniques of AM. Nothing has changed since then, because the self-confident hunter wasted no time on self-development. A strong blow threw the hunter's head far back. A tooth flew out of his mouth, and a stream of blood hung in the air. Viewers had the opportunity to enjoy the victory of the broadcast author and watch it up close. The gods were satisfied with the battle. They felt more relaxed and refreshed. They were no longer bored and did not threaten Cho that he would no longer receive help from them and lose their favor. The boy stood over the body of his opponent. He emphasized that Amma's future wife was very unlucky, and he warned the hunter not to even think about demanding compensation for the knocked-out teeth. People looked at the battlefield in surprise. They couldn't believe that the famous hunter who was called the Fire Sniper had lost to an ordinary guy in a duel. They still thought that it could have been a ruling. Choi addressed the audience and said that it was just a lesson for AMU. He then added that he would send the promised prize, namely a buffalo horn, to the winner, nicknamed Princess Polka Dots, tomorrow. A crow sat on Choi's shoulder. The boy did not understand what had just happened. The monster looked like a chick, and it cawed loudly, scattering its feathers around. The hunter thought that this portended something good. He was even glad that such a bird was perched on his shoulder. The creature was more lovely than the gods who persecuted him and constantly demanded something new. Moreover, the bird was never wrong in its prophecies. The assistant manager looked at Choi with a frown on his face. The man couldn't believe that the cameraman had defeated his boss, whom he had filmed for a vlog for years. He couldn't just stand there and watch anymore. The assistant called Choi Kong-sik as if he wanted to talk to him about something important. The guy hid the shovel in his bag and angrily asked what else was needed from him, because he thought he had already solved all the issues. The man said that the association did not intend to insult such an outstanding hunter, even though he does not possess any extraordinary powers. The situation with the shovel was simply a mistake, and those responsible have already been punished. The guy wasn't going to chat about anything and moved on. The man simply couldn't let the artifact be taken away. He tried with all his might to detain Choi. He said that the organization was ready to provide housing for the guy who was currently sleeping in different places. Choi replied that he was not interested in that. All he wanted from the association was a buffalo horn, which he had promised to give as a prize to one of his followers. Besides, he was not after money. He needed the Zero Blade. The assistant manager said he was willing to help the guy pay his taxes, which were too high for the kind of income Choi was making. The guy replied that wealth wouldn't help him defeat the main monster. The assistant manager asked to accept at least the house as compensation. He understood that he would not be able to fully cover all the debts of the organization, but he tried to do it. He did not demand anything in return. Suddenly, one of the heads of the oracle came to life. This head was responsible for negative prophecies. He understood that this could be connected with the assistant's offer of housing. Therefore, it is worth refusing dubious help. Choi had heard from someone that the oracle only prophesied and predicted events that were to happen very soon and very close. What bad could happen, and why did the oracle react so strongly to the offer of the man who was trying in every way to detain Choi? Choi decided that he was tired of getting into trouble and needed to get out of this place as soon as possible. In the future, he decided to stay away from various organizations of this kind. The boy was attacked by strange monsters from the sky. They looked like a huge bird with the head of a boar or pig. Choi did not understand where they came from. When the dust cleared, the hunter realized that it was the son of a digger. The guard of the Monster Suppression Association pointed in the direction of the shelter and ordered the people to hurry to the shelter. Choi wondered how such a serious organization with such a profile was protected from monster attacks. The hunters and others present fled for cover. The pigwings pursued their victims. The boy realized that the chances of surviving and hiding from the attack were 50-50. Most of the hunters were outside the city now. Without the help of experienced hunters, even hiding could be quite dangerous. Everyone was only concerned about their own safety. Therefore, it could be expected that the members of the organization would not save the lives of ordinary citizens. The doors of the vault closed. A lot of people didn't make it into the vault. They were breaking into the closed hermetic gates. Choi realized that in such conditions, everything always remains the same. The authorities are not interested in saving citizens. A pigwing attacked a girl who was serving Choi at the cash register. The guy didn't hesitate to jump up to the stranger and beat off the monster's clawed paw with a shovel. The hunter ordered the girl to run away, but he promised to catch the monster. He was clutching a shovel tightly in his hands. Choi ordered the girl to hide in the forest, among the trees. After all, it was too dangerous at the entrance to the shelter right now, and there was no one to expect help from except him. The hunter adjusted the camera on his shoulder. He realized that it was time for a new stream and the second part of the live broadcast. The guy felt like a hero, because he was the only one who decided to fight back against the winged monsters. Energy was raging around the boy's body. The gods decided to help this time too. He wanted to kill monsters and save people. Yolgis joined the viewing. Now there were 13 of them. They all watched the boy carefully. A lot of winged monsters were flying at him from the sky. Choi realized that even with the support of all the gods, he alone would not be able to repel all the attackers. There were too many of them. And each of them was the size of an elephant. It would be very difficult to kill each one individually. However, he tried to find a vulnerable spot in the monster's body. Pigwings fed on waste, and therefore they had a very well-developed sense of smell. They could smell even from a very high altitude. With a lightning strike, the boy cut off the leg of one of the attacking monsters. He thought that it would be worth at least crippling the attackers by cutting off a paw from each. This should help him fight the monsters. Choi was amazed at how easily his shovel severed the limbs of the flying monsters. His improvised weapon cut through the bodies of the monsters like butter. The monsters' paws were his priority target. The monsters will need some time to recover and regenerate. And this will play into the hands of Choi and the other hunters who are supposed to come to his aid when they receive a signal about the danger that has unexpectedly occurred. The sluggish monster wasn't very dangerous for the hunter. So it was just a matter of maintaining a good tempo of attack and defense and waiting for reinforcements to arrive, then finally putting an end to the invasion of the winged ones. In the middle of the battle, Choi's attention was distracted from his opponents by a crow. The bird wanted to convey something to the hunter's mind, and since the left head was croaking, it was necessary to beware of something. And it was at this moment that the largest of the monsters attacked. At the last moment, the boy dodged the sharp claws on the strong paws of the pigwing. Choi was very grateful to his new partner for the tip and warning of the enemy's maneuver. And Amma fought the pigs with his snouts. He threw fireballs at them and scattered the winged monsters so they couldn't attack him. Choi thought it was help arriving and was very surprised to see his former boss. The boy thought that he had long since fled the battlefield. The gods smiled at Choi's thoughts. The boy carefully examined his sudden partner and assistant. There were a lot of monsters around AMU. Choi wondered why. The first thing that came to mind was that the monsters that feed on waste were interested in the smell coming from the hunter. They appreciated the stench of that scum. The guy joked that even the pigs had appreciated the stench of shit coming from Ilam. The hunter looked around in surprise and didn't understand what had made the guy come to such conclusions. The man himself was absorbed in the battle. Choi had a very interesting idea. He threw a handful of stones at the monsters that were circling around Ilam. The man did not understand what had happened and why the monsters suddenly started flying away from him. He couldn't believe that he had been saved by his recent enemy. Ilam couldn't even imagine why Kangsik had done this. But now he had the chance to escape to the safe house and try to sit out there. Ilam quickly ran towards the shelter. The people inside couldn't understand what this scoundrel was doing. They were worried about why he was running towards them. After all, it could provoke the winged attackers. The man was breaking into the closed door. The security inside warned him that they would not open the door for him. They said that there was already not enough space inside, and he should find shelter for himself. Besides, he was a provocative factor. Chek looked at the flock of pigwings that were chasing Ilam. He was now sure that the monsters could smell the shit coming from the loser hunter because they flew right after him. And now all the bastards who had forgotten their calling to be hunters were to be punished for their unworthy deeds. The pigsuckers attacked the shelter. Without proper protection, the building would hold out for some time. Choi asked the audience to thank the brainless Ilam for luring the pigwings to the people's shelter. The boy himself was going to help all the people who were unable to get into the shelter. He turned his attention to the hunters who were still holding their ground near the breach in the wall. These valiant defenders, in Choi's opinion, had hidden themselves, or rather, held their ground heroically. But if there had been a few more of them, things would have gone faster. Il-Am still had not given up the idea of hiding in the shelter. The pigsuckers were chasing him and flying almost above the hunter. He tried to take advantage of the chaos that had unfolded around him to hide, like a coward. The piglet was caught by Il-Am and lifted high above the ground in his paws. The man begged Choi to save him. The boy was angry because saving the loser again took up time from saving those who really needed it. Choi jumped high into the air to reach the pig snout's paws. He swung the shovel and shouted for Il-Am to prepare for a hard landing. The man asked him to wait because he was too afraid of crashing. The guy landed on the ground. Behind him, the lucky Il-Am fell right on top of the pig's snout. He pinned the monster's body to the ground and avoided major injuries. Choi saw a crowd gathered at the breach in the wall. People were begging to be let in and help them. The boy thought they must have been inside the shelter for a long time. He realized that no one would open it to them voluntarily. The hunter understood that a real catastrophe could happen right now. The gods advised him to abandon everyone to their fate and run away for his life. One of the gods almost burst out laughing. Reactions and sympathies were divided. Choi saw a large pig snout flying straight at him. The monsters glared angrily at the hunter, who dared to resist and maimed many of his fellow tribesmen. A plan was born in the boy's head. People were breaking into the shelter door at this time. They begged the guards to let them in. No one paid any attention to them. Some of the escapees began to say goodbye to life, accepting their unfortunate fate. One of them noticed a strange picture. Choi ran headlong towards the hideout. Behind him, a pig-nosed hog flew low above the ground. The creature tried to grab the boy and deal with him. The hunter shouted for the people at the entrance to disperse and not interfere. The crowd immediately scattered. At the last moment, Choi managed to dodge the attack of the snout pigs. He watched as the huge monster broke through the wall of the shelter with its body, opening a way for salvation for those who did not have time to run to the shelter. The guy jumped on the body of the pig snout and ordered the people to hurry and run to the middle. The crowd ran for cover. Only the guards were shocked by what the guy had just done. Some of them tried to yell at him. One of the security agents wanted to object to Choi, but he simply ordered him to get down to business and help the newcomers settle in and provide them with the necessary information. He had to take matters into his own hands. Choi called all the hunters who were nearby and said that they still had a chance to win this confrontation and save the lives of the citizens. He said that the monsters were too big and would attack alone. There were many hunters, and with one pig snout, they would definitely have to deal with it as a group. The hunters took heart and decided that the little one was right, and they would be able to repel the attackers and win this battle. The hunters focused their efforts on the monsters. Although they were not real hunters operating in the field, they were able to hold their own against the invasion of winged monsters. Choi was pleased with the result, but they still lacked fire support. He had to take care of the remaining monsters on his own. The hunter resolutely decided to defend humanity at any cost. He mentioned the Zero Blade. The monster became much stronger when attacked by several enemies at once. It grew in power as its enemies increased, and so it must be fought one-on-one. The guy decided to train basic skills so that at the decisive moment, nothing and no one would stand between him and the Zero Blade. The people who watched his heroism would raise society's faith in his strength. People will become his strength. After all, the belief in him and his satisfaction with the fact that he will become the defender of ordinary people, their savior, instilled in him faith in his own abilities and motivated him very well. A woman and her child approached him. They thanked him for saving them. Choi assured them that there was no need to thank him because he was simply doing what he had to do. He was simply fulfilling his duty to them because he was protecting the weak. The other hunters who were not involved in defending the shelter looked at the boy angrily. They heard words of gratitude from Cho's people. The people thanked him for opening a way for them to escape the monsters. Choi said he was extremely glad that no one was hurt. The guy understood that this touch of humanity should help his broadcast get to the top. He was distracted by the okarkal from his thoughts. The left head screamed again. And again we had to expect some troubles that the okarkal foretold. Behind the hunter, a huge pig snout appeared out of nowhere. The monster's clawed paws reached for the boy, and he stood before it without a weapon. He had seconds to react. The boy almost said goodbye to life. The claw grazed the boy. Blood spurted into the air. Choi stared in shock at the monster's claw that had almost torn his body apart. Fortunately, the boy stepped back at the last moment, and the wound was shallow and relatively harmless. The hunter attacked the attacker, but the monster dodged the attack with lightning speed. Choi realized that this time his opponent was much faster and smarter than all the previous pigwings. He was different from his fellow tribesmen. The boy thought that it must have been the leader of the herd. The monster fiercely attacked the hunter, not even giving him a chance to rest and plan the fight. However, he was not confused, because for him it was just another monster. He grabbed one of the tusks tightly. The monster lifted the hunter high into the air and began to swing him around like a toy. With the last of his strength, Choi held onto his opponent. He was not afraid. He was afraid that the monster would escape from him. The creature was so powerful and large that it used its own body to pierce the ceiling of the vault, which reached several floors. The monster wanted to fly out of the closed room as quickly as possible, where it felt confused. Choi climbed out of the rubble. Everyone around him thought the boy was already dead. People were surprised when they saw the hunter, who was almost unharmed. The boy was simply struggling to keep his balance, but it didn't last long. A piggy with a snout crawled out from under the rubble. He was even more furious and burning with a desire for revenge. The clawed paws were approaching Choi. The boy looked at his enemy in confusion and didn't know what to do. A girl hunter slowly descended from the broken ceiling into the room. She asked if the boy needed help and if he was going to leave all the work to her. The creature did not see that another hunter had come to help. The girl asked again if Choi was one of those men who put all the hard work on the fragile shoulders of women and girls. The audience in the chat chanted that the girl was a real goddess. Together, the two hunters dealt with the monster. Choi dealt the final blow with a shovel and cut the pig's body in half. Now they were even with the girl hunter. This teamwork was very much liked by the gods. Some of them simply fell in love with this girl. Someone just smiled, and the ambiguous looks could speak of the different intentions and thoughts of the gods. The girl asked Choi if it was true that he had recently been hospitalized. She had not expected to see him in such a place. The boy replied that he was recovering quickly. The hunter agreed with his words. The goddess talked about her younger brother, who was a fan of Choi's streams. The guy was surprised. He couldn't believe that the brother of such an outstanding hunter watched his stream and was subscribed to his channel. Kim said she didn't have any more time because her team was waiting on the mountain for her orders. The guy thanked her and assured her that he would get out of here on his own. He looked around for a way out of this room. Before him appeared rows of bookshelves, reaching the very ceiling. Choi thought that the rumors about the organization's secret archives were actually true. He walked down a long corridor, trying to gauge the scale of the vault. He came across a rescue team and decided that was the end of the broadcast. He said he would be back as soon as he was treated. One of the gods wondered if there would be anything else exciting today. The gods took turns to rush Choi. He told them that he needed to recover from the fight and heal the wounds he had received from the pig snouts in the battle. But he understood that if it weren't for the gods, he wouldn't have been able to defeat even his first monster. And he wouldn't have gotten everything he has now. He needed to express his gratitude and respect to the gods. He was also curious to see how much more powerful he could become. He assured his patrons that the adventure they had been waiting for so long would be many more. They only had to wait a little longer, and he would grant their wishes. As he was leaving the building, a stranger approached Choi. He assured him that Choi thought he was invincible and very cool, although in reality it was all a result of him having cool gadgets. The guy realized that this was one of those hunters who were outside the city at the time of the attack on the vault. The man asked if Choi was selling his artifact. The stranger was ready to pay any money. Choi thought that fate was constantly throwing such people into his life for a reason. He asked the gods how he should deal with this man. Adventures would have to wait a while because urgent matters needed to be resolved, the gods thought. They were making a thoughtful and important decision about their further actions. Cho was not delighted with their mood, but suddenly, unexpectedly for himself, he received a donation from his patrons. The boy understood the gods' hint. He believed that the gods were seriously set on further adventures. He was interested in what awaited him this time. So far, he had not noticed anything interesting. The main thing was that it should not be too unexpected a surprise. The stranger insisted that he wanted to buy Choi's shovel, and it was better to do it in a good way. After all, threats could follow from his side. The guy replied that the shovel was not for sale. This was his final position. The man said more conciliatorily that he would pay any money for the shovel, and he promised that he would treat her much better than Choi himself had done all this time. The guy was confused by the insistence. Choi said he would turn on the camera and no longer vouch for his actions. He asked the man to untie himself and go his own way. The stranger was not satisfied with this response. He threatened. The organization's agent called the annoying interlocutor Choi. He asked what he was doing. The agent understood that the hunter wanted to take things from Choi. The man denied this as slander against him. The agent was still talking about how hunters should respect each other, as if they were doing something together. He kept talking about this until his gaze fell on the shovel in Choi's hands. By the expression on his face, Choi understood that now he would not be able to avoid new problems. It is worth expecting that the situation will get out of control, and everything will become much worse. After all, a new contender for the shovel will appear. Choi decided not to run away from problems this time. The boy would solve this issue right now and on this spot, because he was tired of running away from problems. Besides, he didn't like people who were too pushy. He prepared his weapon for battle. In an unknown way, a ring appeared on the handle of the shovel. The hunter thought that this could not be a gift from the gods, because what good is that ring? One of the gods asked if Cho liked it. The boy was a little disappointed that the gift turned out to be an ordinary ring on the handle of a shovel. But Choi understood that the ring was there for a reason. It was supposed to serve something, not just be for beauty. A crowd of hunters surrounded Choi and the men arguing with him. Everyone present involuntarily paid attention to the artifact in the boy's hands. Choi reminded them of the story of Excalibur. Everyone looked intently at the shovel. The guy stuck a shovel into the ground. He announced to everyone present that the artifact would be possessed by the one who could pull the shovel out of the ground without using superpowers. To such a person, he was ready to give a gift from the gods. The next condition will be that whoever tries but fails to draw the weapon will kneel before Choi and apologize for his pride and insulting the boy's honor. The crowd rushed to the shovel. The conditions of the competition seemed too easy to them, and everyone confidently ran towards the artifact. People pushed each other away. Choi turned on the camera. It was like a cold shower for everyone who was rushing to the artifact. They covered their faces and asked the guy why he turned on the camera and asked him not to film them, because it was not fair. The guy replied that they were very cunning, because in case of failure they wanted to just leave this place. But that's not how life works, and you have to pay a price for everything. The recording will be made just in case, so let them think before doing it. The man who started the argument walked over to the shovel and grabbed it with both hands. He pulled the artifact with all his might, but it remained immovable in the ground. The hunter was surprised that the weapon turned out to be so heavy. Those who wanted to take possession of the artifact pushed each other away. But their efforts remained unsuccessful. They were simply wasting time. Choi understood that they would not be able to do anything anyway. He wasn't even worried that anyone would be able to fulfill the conditions he set. But the hunters didn't lose their enthusiasm and tried to grab the shovel that was just sticking out of the ground in front of them. Some of them began to accuse the boy of being a fraud. They still couldn't figure out how, but the boy was leading them by the nose and deceiving them. In their opinion, there was definitely a hidden mechanism there. They turned to the boy and asked him to try it himself and prove that there was no trickery involved. The gods, who were watching these competitions, simply rolled on the floor with laughter. Choi was afraid that now the gods would laugh at him, and would make it so that he himself would not be able to extract the magical artifact, and would disgrace himself in the presence of hunters and a bunch of ordinary people, and even live in front of the audience. One of the gods emphasized that the artifact would only be given to someone who was pure in soul. The guy thought about what these words meant. Those present looked at Choi with skepticism and already imagined how he would screw up. Some of the hunters who possessed extraordinary strength understood that even if the artifact failed them, the boy would definitely not be able to do anything with it. Now was the time to rejoice and taunt them with Choi. The guy replied that his shovel was just too heavy, and there was no trick to it. He is ready to demonstrate his strength and training. But those present will be forced to forgive him for the slander. Choi pulled out a shovel. At that very moment, the ground around him shook and a powerful earthquake began. But even he could not surprise the people who saw how easily the boy pulled out a weapon. The hunter himself could not understand what was happening around him. He only saw the surprised and frightened faces of the other hunters. The gods were laughing and rejoicing at something that Cho could not understand and that only the other gods knew about. The boy looked at the artifact in his hands. He was still thinking about the fact that for a long time, earthquakes did not threaten Korea and were a rarity on its territory. With the arrival of monsters, everything changed. The climate and natural conditions underwent significant changes. The strange thing was that the ground split right where the shovel was sticking out of the ground. The thought occurred to Choi that he had caused the earthquake. Fortunately, there was no serious damage. The boy's gaze fell on the ring. He could not believe that the ring had caused the earthquake. He was curious to know how it had worked. The gods all congratulated the boy on his success, although he did not understand what it was. The hunters, who also wanted to take possession of the artifact, noticed that the earthquake occurred right after Choi pulled out his shovel. It was hard to believe, but all the facts pointed to that. The guy decided to act loudly and brazenly. He began broadcasting. Choi replied to the audience that the timing was coincidental. But it is worth noting that it could not have been a fall. Those who want to know the truth should stay with him. Choi hid the shovel in his bag. He understood that in order to avoid any more adventures, he should get out of this place. It seemed to be cursed. He shouted, "Okar cool!" and prepared to leave. Late in the evening, the boy sat down at a table in one of the cafes on his street. He couldn't believe that this crazy day was finally over. Everything had been so strange and incomprehensible during the day, and now everything was quiet, as if nothing had happened. He looked at his injured hand, which was almost pain-free. Choi believed that the gods were blessing him. After all, it was simply impossible to get away from the injury so quickly. He was surprised every time. The guy thought that without the blessings of the gods, he would never have achieved the position he was in now. He was really lucky. But we should not forget all the efforts and exhausting training that he had done. Finally, the time had come when he could get his fill, and the gods would have nothing to say to him. Some of the gods laughed. Choi noticed the man at the next table watching him. Popularity was out of place now. People saw today's news report that monster attacks have been increasing recently. Proof of this was today's attack by pigwings on the shelter of the Monster Suppression Association. The hunter who made the greatest contribution to repelling the attack was a popular hunter who became such after many years of working as an operator for another monster hunter, who at a crucial moment abandoned him to his fate. The young hunter did not have any extraordinary abilities, but he was very smart, agile, and strong. In addition to all this, he used an extremely powerful magical artifact in battle, a magic shovel. News anchors promised to continue to closely follow the newly minted hunter and cover the details of his confrontation with the danger that threatens all of humanity, although many wondered whether this was truly an act of courage or a play for the public. The gods were outraged by the last words spoken by the announcer. Some said that the boy should start moving and doing something so that his popularity and influence would not diminish. The new god joined in the observation. Motivated by the new deity's trust and support for Choi, the boy decided that he could not waste time and needed to take action for his own future good. The princess with the polka dots would be his next target. Kim Mushin Avenue was the safest place in Korea. It was named after a famous monster fighter who died with the words "soul" on his lips. It was very close to the Association Building. This was the reason why it was extremely quiet and safe. And that's why land or housing in this area was extremely expensive. Choi couldn't believe that a user who called herself Princess in Polka Dots lived in such a place. He understood that this was either an oligarch or the child of a very influential politician, or even a national hero who had secured the future of his descendants with his deeds. The question of who this user could be haunted him. Two men came out to meet the boy. One of them was fully armored, in combat gear. Another stranger in plain clothes asked what the boy had forgotten and that he couldn't just walk around here. Choi covered himself with a shovel. The laser sight was already running along the boy's neck. The hunter made excuses that he had no bad intentions. However, the guard with the gun thought otherwise. He emphasized that Choi was armed. The man fired an electric charge from a gun. But later, it turned out that he was a famous monster hunter who took part in the defense of the shelter. The guard disappeared and asked for forgiveness for his inattention. The guy assured that nothing terrible had happened, and there was no need to make such a fuss about what the man had done. The security guard assured that he was actually a fan of Choi and had been following him and his broadcasts for a long time. The boy replied that he had come here on business. The men asked what important business had brought the monster hunter to the area. Choi showed the buffalo horn and explained that it was a special prize for the spectator. The guard was simply delighted that Choi decided to deliver the prize to the fan personally. Of course, it was not possible to just let him into a restricted area, but for such a case, the man could make an exception. The man was impressed by the hunter's kindness and responsibility. He promised to keep it a secret and let Choi into the middle of the room. This was something that could be allowed to a hero who had saved an entire city. In the elevator, Choi thought about how his life had changed since he became famous. Fans were already starting to help him. Not long ago, he couldn't even dream of this. In the hallway, Choi wondered if he was really inside an apartment building or if it was some kind of palace. He was struck by the luxury and taste of the premises. A life of luxury had its advantages and its disadvantages. But the latter were not yet visible. He stood in front of the door of the apartment where the winner of his contest was to live. Chehwe was nervous, expecting to see the beautiful young girl who was hidden under such a nickname. The gods were also expecting something romantic. The guy asked the gods not to push him into rash decisions. He couldn't fool around or play the role of a clown here. After all, it could end in something more serious than a stun gun. He decided to ring the doorbell and simply leave the gift on the doorstep. The girl came out of the apartment and looked around in surprise. There was no one in the hallway, and in front of her lay a buffalo horn. The fan happily held the horn in her hands. She was amazed that her idol had kept his promise. Choi looked at the girl and understood how well the nickname she had chosen for herself suited her. The hunter liked the girl. Suddenly, the ogre on his shoulder screamed. Choi closed the monster's mouth. But the girl heard the scream and turned her attention to the place where Choi was hiding from her. She asked who was hiding there. There was silence in response. Choi ran away from the house. He still wondered why he was acting so strangely. It wasn't hard to say a few words to the girl. Congratulate her on her victory and something like that. The monster hunter was giving in to an ordinary girl. The security guard at the exit asked why Choi was leaving the house so quickly. He asked if the boy needed help. The boy thanked him and hurried away. He asked the man not to tell anyone that Choi had been here. At that moment, one of the gods said that Choi would never find a girl. The other god sighed sadly. The boy thought that his patrons were just laughing at him. He couldn't believe that such powerful beings would care about something like that. The guy was so lost in thought that he didn't even notice Kim coming out to meet him. He couldn't understand the sudden appearance of a girl hunter in the area. The first thing that came to mind was that she was too interested in him. The girl replied that he should stop acting like a fool. She just lives here. And he is constantly followed by some problems and troubles. Choi assured that he simply gave the promised prize to the fan. The girl promised that she would pretend to believe him. But even during the battle with the Zero Blade, she had not had the impression that the boy did not care about his life. He did not value him or appreciate him. Kim often saw such people disappearing somewhere very quickly or simply dying. Therefore, Choi should behave more carefully and at least sometimes think about the consequences of his actions and deeds. And be more careful. He replied that he would try to protect himself, but it was difficult for him to do so in the conditions of battle. Okarkal suddenly attacked his master. The boy could not understand the reasons for the attack. He only noticed that the birds seemed to be glowing with happiness. Choi wondered what these monsters ate and how to take care of them. It was actually interesting to learn more about this monster. Suddenly, Choi thought about where the monster core he had gotten had gone. One of the gods blamed the Okarkal. Another said it wasn't him. A third refused to speak at all without his lawyer. The bird pretended not to understand what was being said and turned away. The Okarkal was running away. Choi tried to catch the fugitive who had eaten the kernel. The boy roared that the monster dared to touch such a precious thing. He promised to deal very severely with the scoundrel who had done this. Suddenly, the silence was broken by an alarm. A flock of huge, hog-winged birds flew over the city. The authorities asked people to go to the nearest shelters. Danger was lurking in the air, and the siren warned people again. A woman with a child in her arms ran headlong to the shelter, the doors of which were slowly closing. She asked to wait and not leave her to her fate. The white-haired woman asked to help at least her child. At the last moment, Choi landed on the monster and used a shovel to knock the monster's head to the ground. The woman recognized her rescuer. The hunter simply asked if the mother and her child were okay, and if they were injured. High in the air above Choi and the defeated monster, an Okarkal flew. The hunter attached a camera to his assistant. The bird flew high in the sky and took pretty good shots from such an angle. The gods were impatiently waiting for a new battle. The assistant manager was sitting in his boss's office. He was talking about how Choi was a real problem for the organization. He was too powerful and popular. The guy was also very boastful. The chief believed that the main problem was that the boy was not a participant and member of the organization. He was also concerned about the artifact that the boy possessed. The association could not possibly take the item from the hunter. The assistant suggested simply taking away Choi's shovel. The chief replied that these were not their methods. He added that they were not ordinary hooligans and could not act like that. On the contrary, it is worth rewarding the hero who saved the city. The insidious head of the organization said that the boy would be given the mysterious apartment number 44, which had never received a single tenant, and all the people who tried to settle there had mysteriously disappeared. The man asked his assistant how his idea was. It bordered on genius in the boss's opinion, and it was worthy of such a hero who was becoming more and more popular among ordinary people. The organization's reputation would also rise. But if something happens to Che Hui, then this way all suspicions from the organization will disappear, because it is impossible for anyone to try to harm a well-deserved hero after receiving an award and all the honors. At this time in Seoul, near the defense line of Sector A, a group of hunters were undergoing the procedure for admission further, beyond the boundaries of the defensive fortifications that were supposed to contain the monsters and become a protection for the citizens. The hunters asked how long they had to wait. They asked very anxiously how long they had to stand in front of the door, and why the guards had not been warned earlier that a group of hunters were supposed to pass by this very place. The guards on the wall were anxiously moving the barrel of their machine guns. One of them asked his partner what the hunters were muttering there. His friend assured him that nothing terrible had happened and that they just had to keep their composure. The man with the machine gun thought that if the hunters didn't have extraordinary abilities, he would teach them good manners. His partner said that there was nothing they could do now anyway. The hunters were talking among themselves about the information the scouts had provided. The scouting party had found traces of a herd of blastators. One of the hunters was upset by this fact because he had very little time left until the end of his shift. The guard on the tower noticed a cloud of dust on the horizon. His comrade asked where it could have come from. Sergeant Park could not believe his eyes, for the cloud seemed to be moving. Choi was walking down a street where people were wandering. He heard that the Seoul Assault Unit was looking for doctors and asking anyone who wanted to come to them. The Sun Assault Unit was planning a military operation. The women at the control room said that due to the threat of a Vrivotov attack, the alert level had been raised to level 2. One of the hunters' detachments had disappeared, and so help was needed to find them. A man who looked like the commander of one of the hunting squads told his subordinates not to interfere in this situation because the first-rate monsters wouldn't even cover the cost of equipment for the hike. Choi realized that almost nothing has changed in this world. Human nature has become stagnant, and even centuries of evolution and coexistence of people in cities and various kinds of settlements cannot save humanity from destructiveness. 24 hours ago, Choi was sitting in the office of the Monster Slayer Association. The man who was the head of the organization confirmed that the boy had understood him correctly. The association was giving a free house to the hero. This was a reward for his courage and willingness to sacrifice himself. Not every hunter could dream of such a thing, but only worthy, extraordinary fighters with monsters. The house was located in the city of Hanami. This is a city that was formed quite recently and was very useful for hunters of all ranks and levels of training. There you could get the necessary information and buy hunting equipment and gear. The boy realized that this was a new building. From the very beginning, it had been the most prosperous and developed district in Korea. But its disadvantageous location on the flat terrain made this city easy prey for monsters. Hunters began to come to this place to train and protect the local population. The guy wondered if the price of his heroism was too high. The assistant assured him that the house was very good. Choi guessed that something was being planned against him. However, it was not yet clear what exactly. He had to be very careful and try not to show any concern. He decided to see what kind of house was being offered. The gods began to actively communicate with each other. They all understood that extraordinary adventures were ahead. The patrons supported Choi's intention to inspect the house offered to him. The boy assured that he would soon go to the place. But before that, he asked if the gods had prepared gifts for him for the housewarming. The gods hinted that the boy had forgotten about his conscience and was daydreaming a lot. An old acquaintance and blogger, whom he had met in the ruins of the city after another monster attack, crept up behind Choi. The man praised the boy for his bravery during the battle with the pig snouts. The man suggested a joint stream at a spa salon. After all, Choi had not yet fully recovered and recuperated from the battle with the pig wings. The guy thought about how much this streamer made him angry. Streamer said he was very sorry that he was a bit busy last time and didn't have time to help Choi. If urgent matters hadn't distracted him, he would have definitely been a good help to the guy. The streamer asked when the guy was moving to a new place to live. Choi didn't understand how the man knew about it. He replied that he got the information from his younger sister, who was a real information maniac. The girl was aware of all the new rumors and lies, and she gladly shared them with her older brother. The girl blushed and said that she was very pleased to meet the famous and popular monster hunter. Choi greeted him back and assured him that it must be very difficult for the girl with such a little brother. The man grumbled that the girl was covering the camera lens. He offered to show Choi the way home. Choi asked what the streamer was up to. The streamer replied that his intentions were pure and completely good. You shouldn't be rude to someone who wants to help. Choi might not trust him, but the man knows this city very well. They were walking down the city street. There were very few people, and Choi asked why the situation was like this on the street. The man replied that many residents had gone to strengthen the city's defenses, because according to the latest information, there was a threat of an attack by the explosive towers. A group of hunters approached the streamer from behind. They ordered Chosop to turn off the camera. The leader of the hunters asked why the streamer was still in the city and when he would stop his stupid filming. Cho Seop asked how his friend was doing and how things were out of town. The man replied that he was not the streamer's friend. He asked Cho to stop clowning around and join the assault squad. Chosop replied that he would be happy to join the group, but he already had plans for the week. He had some business with the boy standing next to him. The leader asked if he was the popular Terry hunter. He asked Choi to show his hunter card. The boy asked why he should fulfill his request. The leader was convinced that the boy was indeed very sharp and self-confident. After all, he had only defeated a few weak monsters. He held a sharp, serrated knife to the boy's throat. The leader mocked the young hunter, who thought he was cool after killing and driving away several weak monsters. The leader continued to speak and hint that defeating a few low-ranking monsters within the city limits did not make them true monster fighters. They could not even stand next to true defenders. He ordered to stop filming the broadcasts and to be grateful to the real monster hunters and not to make a show of themselves. The leader suggested checking whether he was right and confirming his words in practice. Choi agreed to find out who was the clown. Cho Seop was too scared by what was happening. He thought something terrible might happen. Fortunately, a group of local law enforcement officers rushed to them. The woman in command of the squad ordered them to disperse quickly. The leader assured her that they were just chatting nicely with their comrade and were not planning to do anything bad. The assault unit was watching all of this. The men who belonged to it were members of a movement dedicated to destroying monsters that required teamwork. They claimed to be fighting for justice, but in reality they were no better than thugs. Therefore, the attitude towards them by local law enforcement agencies was ambivalent. Not every squad had a good reputation and was popular among the locals. Cho Seop took Choi to his new apartment. The man said that living here by himself would be really cool. But if the boy hadn't gotten scared that time and finished off the Zero Blade, he would be living on Kim Mushin Avenue right now. Choi thanked them for their help and assured them that his assistants were free to go about their business. Cho asked if Choi would offer them some tea, since they had spent a lot of time escorting the hero to the house. Choi asked if he could knock out Cho Seop's teeth. The man assured him that this time they wouldn't bother the guy and would check in with him later. The girl apologized for her brother's behavior, which was inappropriate.